Rest Stop 47. I will tell you about the night I almost became one of the souls forever trapped at Rest Stop 47. And if you are driving alone on a deserted highway tonight, make sure you do not stop when you see two men standing by the road. Because they are not human. They are something far worse. They are what remains after a person dies but is not allowed to leave. My name is Tyler Morrison. I was 23 years old, freshly graduated from Portland State University with a degree in communications that turned out to be worth less than the paper it was printed on. 6 months of sending out resumes, 6 months of rejection emails that all started with the same hollow phrase, and 6 months of watching my savings account drain away like water through a cracked pipe. The apartment I'd been so proud of signing a lease for became a prison cell I could no longer afford. So I made the decision that every failed American dreamer eventually makes. I decided to go home. My parents lived in Sacramento, California. The drive from Portland was not particularly long if you took the direct route down Interstate 5, maybe 10 hours if you pushed it. But I did not want to take the direct route. Part of me wanted to delay the inevitable moment when I would have to look into my father's eyes and see that familiar mixture of disappointment and concern. The other part of me, the part that still believed in adventure and possibility, wanted one last taste of freedom before admitting defeat. I chose to go the long way, east through Oregon, then south through Idaho and Nevada, before finally turning west into California. It would add at least 2 days to the journey, but I told myself it would be worth it. I told myself a lot of things back then. The vehicle I would be making this journey in was a 2003 Ford Econoline van that had seen better days sometime during the Bush administration. The previous owner, a retired fisherman from the Oregon coast, had used it to haul equipment for 2 decades. And the interior still carried the faint ghost of salmon and diesel. I had bought it for $2,000, which was exactly $2,000 more than it was probably worth. The paint had faded from white to a sickly yellow rust bloomed around the wheel wells like spreading disease, and the engine made a sound like an old man clearing his throat every time I turned the key. But it ran, and it had enough space in the back for the thin mattress I had bought from Walmart and the cardboard boxes containing everything I owned, which was not much, some clothes, a laptop that was 3 years past its prime, a few books I kept telling myself I would read, the accumulated debris of a life that had not yet figured out what it wanted to be. I left Portland on a Tuesday morning in late October, when the city was still wrapped in its perpetual blanket of gray mist. The streets were slick with overnight rain, and the air tasted like wet concrete and dying leaves. I did not look back as I merged onto the highway. There was nothing to look back at. The first day passed without incident. I drove through the Cascade Range, watching the pine forests roll by in endless waves of green. The road was familiar, predictable, the kind of driving that lets your mind wander while your hands handle the wheel on autopilot. By evening, I had crossed into Idaho, and the landscape had transformed into something flatter, drier, more honest about its emptiness. I spent that first night in a Walmart parking lot in Boise. This was a trick I had learned from the van life forums online. Walmart allowed overnight parking in most locations, and the bright lights and constant flow of customers provided a sense of security that the open road could not offer. I pulled into a spot at the far end of the lot, away from the entrance, but still within view of the security cameras, and settled onto my mattress. Sleep came easier than I expected. The exhaustion of driving for 12 hours straight had worn away my usual anxiety about sleeping in unfamiliar places. I dreamed of nothing which was a mercy. But before I fell asleep, something happened that I dismissed at the time, something that I should have paid more attention to. I had gone inside to use the restroom and buy some snacks for the next day. The store was nearly empty at that hour, just a few late-night shoppers pushing carts through the fluorescent aisles with the glazed expressions of insomniacs. As I was walking back to my van, an old woman stepped out from between two parked cars and blocked my path. She was small and weathered with skin like crumpled paper and eyes that seemed to look through me rather than at me. Her clothes were dated, a faded floral dress that might have been fashionable in the 70s, and she clutched a worn purse against her chest like a shield. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she spoke. "Do not take Route 47, son. That road does not lead anywhere, not anywhere you want to go." I smiled politely the way you do when a stranger says something that does not make sense. I had no idea what Route 47 was. My planned route did not include any road by that name, at least not that I knew of. "Thank you," I said. "I will keep that in mind." She did not move. Her eyes stayed fixed on mine, and something in them made my skin prickle. "They are still waiting there," she said. "They have been waiting for 50 years, and they are always hungry." I stepped around her, still smiling, still playing the role of the polite young man who humors elderly strangers. She was probably confused, I told myself, possibly suffering from dementia. There was no Route 47 on my map, and there were certainly no hungry things waiting for me anywhere. I forgot about her before I even reached my van. That was my first mistake. The second day started well. I woke at dawn stiff but rested and got back on the road before the morning traffic could slow me down. The plan was to cut south through Idaho, clip the corner of Utah, and enter Nevada before nightfall. From there, it would be a straight shot across the desert to California. The landscape grew more desolate as I drove. The forests gave way to scrubland, then to vast expanses of brown earth dotted with sagebrush and the occasional stunted tree. The sky stretched overhead in an unbroken dome of pale blue, so wide and empty that it made me feel like an insect crawling across a dinner plate. By late afternoon, I was somewhere in northeastern Nevada, following a highway that seemed to have been forgotten by the rest of the world. Traffic had thinned to almost nothing. I would go 20 minutes without seeing another vehicle, and when one did appear, it was usually a pickup truck or an 18-wheeler that roared past in the opposite direction without slowing down. It was around 4 in the afternoon when my phone lost signal. I noticed it when I tried to check the map. The screen showed a spinning circle where the route should have been, and the word "searching for GPS" blinked in the corner like a dying heartbeat. I was not worried at first. This happened sometimes in remote areas. The signal would come back. But it did not come back. I drove for another hour, watching the bars on my phone remain stubbornly empty. The road ahead was straight and featureless, with no signs, no exits, no indication of where I was or how far I had to go. The sun was sinking toward the horizon, painting the desert in shades of orange and red. Then I came to the intersection. It appeared without warning, a fork in the road where the highway split into two branches. On the left, a sign pointed toward Interstate 80 and the promise of civilization. On the right, a smaller road curved away into the empty desert, marked only by a single weathered sign that read State Route 47. I stared at that sign for a long moment. Route 47. The road the old woman had warned me about, the road that did not lead anywhere. There is a moment in every horror story when the protagonist makes a choice that seals their fate. The moment when they open the door they should have left closed, or answer the phone they should have let ring, or take the path they should have avoided. Looking back, I know that this was my moment. This was when everything went wrong. I did not intend to take Route 47. My foot was already pressing the brake, preparing to turn left toward the interstate. But at that exact instant, a tanker truck came barreling up from behind me, horn blaring, headlights flashing. I swerved right to avoid being rear-ended, and before I knew what was happening, I was on Route 47. The tanker roared past on the interstate, its horn fading into the distance. I pulled over to the shoulder, breathing hard, and looked back at the intersection. I could still turn around. I could still go back. But when I looked at the interstate, I saw a line of red taillights stretching toward the horizon. Traffic jam. Probably an accident somewhere ahead. Route 47, by contrast, was completely empty. a ribbon of gray asphalt disappearing into the desert with not a single car in sight. It will be faster this way, I told myself. It runs parallel to the interstate. I will just take it for a few miles and then merge back. That was the lie I told myself, the comfortable, logical explanation that let me ignore the warning signs, the first of many. Route 47 was different from the highways I'd been driving all day. Narrower, for one thing. Just 2 lanes barely wide enough for my van to pass another vehicle if one appeared. The pavement was cracked and patched, scattered with potholes that made the van shudder every few seconds. And the landscape on either side was not just empty. It was wrong. The desert scrub had been replaced by twisted oak trees that grew in clusters like huddled figures. Their branches were bare, stripped of leaves despite it being only October, and they reached toward the sky in shapes that looked almost like grasping hands. The ground between them was black, not brown, burned maybe or just dead. The sun was setting now, and the light that filtered through those skeletal trees was the color of old blood. I turned on my headlights, but they seemed weaker than usual, their beams swallowed by the gathering darkness. I tried the radio to fill the silence. Every station was static. Not the normal hiss of stations too far away to receive, but a deeper sound, a crackling that rose and fell like breathing. And underneath it, so faint I almost convinced myself I was imagining it. I heard voices, fragments of words. Someone calling for help from very far away. Just interference, I told myself. Radio signals bouncing off the atmosphere. Nothing unusual. I turned the radio off. The road went on. Mile after mile of empty asphalt with no signs, no mile markers, no indication that anyone had driven this way in years. The only proof that I was not completely alone was the occasional flash of eyes in my headlights. Animals, probably. Deer or coyotes or whatever else lived in this wasteland. But the eyes were always in pairs, and they were always at the same height, the same distance apart, like they were standing upright. I told myself it was deer. I told myself a lot of things. The first sign of anything resembling civilization appeared around 9 that night. I almost drove past it, my eyes half closed from exhaustion and the hypnotic monotony of the road. But something made me look to the right, and there it was. A cluster of lights in the darkness. Faint flickering, but undeniably real. As I got closer, the lights resolved into shapes. A low building with a corrugated metal roof. A pole with a single lamp that buzzed and flickered like it was fighting to stay alive. A gravel parking lot empty except for the shadows. A sign by the road so old that the paint had mostly flaked away read, "Rest Stop 47, Nevada Department of Transportation, Travelers Welcome." Travelers Welcome. There was something about those words that made my stomach clench. Something about the way they sat there faded and forgotten, promising hospitality in a place that looked like hospitality had died decades ago. But I needed to stop. My bladder was aching. My eyes were burning and the gas gauge was hovering just above empty. I had not seen another gas station in over 2 hours. This might be my only chance before the tank ran dry. I pulled into the gravel lot, the tires crunching in a way that sounded too loud in the silence. The building in front of me was clearly a restroom, concrete block walls, covered in years of grime, a single door hanging slightly open. The light above it flickered in an arrhythmic pattern that made my head hurt if I looked at it too long. I turned off the engine and sat there for a moment listening. Nothing. No crickets, no nightbirds, no wind rustling through the dead trees. Just silence. The kind of silence that presses against your eardrums that makes you aware of your own heartbeat in a way that feels invasive. And there was a smell, faint at first, but growing stronger the longer I sat there. Damp rot like something left to decay in a flooded basement. And underneath it, something else. Something metallic and organic. Something that made me think of slaughterhouses and emergency rooms. Probably a dead animal somewhere nearby, I told myself. Coyote got hit by a car, dragged itself into the brush to die. I got out of the van. The air was cold, much colder than it should have been for late October in the Nevada desert. My breath misted in front of my face and I could feel goosebumps rising on my arms beneath my jacket. The silence pressed in from all sides so complete that I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I walked to the restroom building, my footsteps crunching on gravel that seemed to absorb the sound rather than reflect it. The door was heavy, rusted on its hinges, and it groaned when I pushed it open. The smell hit me like a wall. I gagged, stumbling back, my hand covering my nose and mouth. It was worse inside, so much worse. Not just decay now, but human waste, old and fresh, layered on top of each other, mixed with something chemical that burned my nostrils. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing stained concrete walls, a floor covered in debris and dark puddles, and 3 toilet stalls with doors hanging at broken angles. And writing. So much writing. Every surface was covered in it. Some carved into the concrete with knives or sharp rocks, some written in marker or spray paint, some in substances I did not want to identify. Messages left by travelers who had come before me. Warnings. Do not sleep here. They are watching. If you see them, do not look into their eyes. And one written in what looked like dried blood, the letters brown and flaking. We tried to leave. They would not let us. I stood there reading those words and I felt something shift in my chest. A cold knot of fear that I tried to push down, tried to explain away. Just vandalism, I told myself. Kids trying to scare tourists. An elaborate prank that had been building up over years, each visitor adding their own contribution to the mythology. There is no such thing as they. I used the restroom as quickly as I could, breathing through my mouth, keeping my eyes away from the walls. When I emerged, the parking lot was exactly as I had left it. Empty. Silent. The single light still flickering overhead. I walked back to my van and stood there for a moment, looking around at the darkness that surrounded the rest stop on all sides. The trees were closer than I remembered. Their twisted branches seemed to lean toward the light, toward me, like they were curious about the visitor who had wandered into their domain. In a place you cannot escape from, the only choice that matters is whether you face your end standing or on your knees. I should have left. I should have gotten in my van, pointed it back toward the interstate, and driven until the sun came up. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to go. But I was so tired, so incredibly bone-deep tired. My eyes would not stay open. My hands were trembling on the steering wheel. If I tried to drive in this condition, I would fall asleep and crash. I would die on this road alone, and nobody would find me for days. Better to sleep here for a few hours, I reasoned. Set an alarm for 3 in the morning. Get enough rest to make it to the next town safely. That was the logic. That was the excuse. I climbed into the back of my van, pulled the curtain across the front windshield, and lay down on my mattress. I set an alarm on my phone for 3 a.m. I closed my eyes. The last thing I saw before sleep took me was the time on my phone screen, 9:47 p.m. I did not know it then, but I would not sleep past 2:47. That was when they would come for me. There is a moment between sleep and waking when your body knows something is wrong before your mind can understand why. That night, my body knew someone was watching me before my ears heard them whispering. I did not fall asleep so much as I fell through sleep, plummeting through layers of consciousness into a darkness that felt older than dreaming. The exhaustion that had been building for 2 days finally claimed me, pulling me under like a riptide. And for a while, there was nothing. No thoughts, no fears, just the black velvet emptiness of a mind too tired to even imagine. But then the dreams came. I found myself walking through a field at night. The grass beneath my feet was dead and brittle, crunching with each step like old bones. The sky above was starless, a dome of pure black that seemed to press down on me with physical weight. And ahead, barely visible in the darkness, stood rows upon rows of wooden crosses. A graveyard. But not like any graveyard I'd ever seen. Each cross was crude, hand-carved from rough wood, the kind you might make with a hatchet and desperation. And beside each cross sat a vehicle, cars mostly, but also trucks, vans, motorcycles, all of them old, all of them rusted, all of them empty. Their doors hung open like mouths frozen mid-scream, and their windows reflected nothing because there was no light to reflect. I walked among them, unable to stop my feet from carrying me forward. The crosses stretched on forever, disappearing into the darkness in every direction. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. And as I passed each one, I felt something watching me from the shadows between the vehicles. Something that moved when I was not looking directly at it. Then I saw two figures standing at the far end of one row. They were too distant to make out clearly, just silhouettes against the deeper darkness behind them, but I could tell they were looking at me. I could feel their attention like a physical pressure on my skin, and as I watched, they raised their hands and waved. "Come join us," the gesture seemed to say. "We have been waiting for you." I wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at me to turn and flee, but my legs would not obey. Instead, they carried me closer to the figures, step by inevitable step, the dead grass crunching beneath my feet like the laughter of something not quite human. The figures grew clearer as I approached. Two men, one taller than the other, both wearing clothes that looked decades out of date. Their faces were still hidden in shadow, but I could see their smiles now. Wide smiles, too wide. Smiles that seemed to split their faces in half. And then I was standing in front of a hole in the ground, a grave. Freshly dug the earth, dark and moist, the smell of it filling my nostrils with the scent of decay and endings. I looked down into it and saw a shape at the bottom. A body lying on its back, arms folded across its chest. My body. I was looking at myself dead and buried, my eyes open and staring at nothing, my mouth frozen in a silent scream. "Welcome home, Tyler," a voice whispered in my ear. "You are going to love it here." I woke up. My eyes snapped open and I lay there in the darkness of my van, my heart slamming against my ribs so hard I could hear it. The mattress beneath me was damp with sweat and my hands were shaking as I fumbled for my phone. 2:31 a.m. Still almost 30 minutes until my alarm. Just a dream, I told myself. Just a nightmare brought on by exhaustion and those creepy messages in the bathroom. Nothing real, nothing to worry about. But even as I thought it, I knew something was wrong. The silence had changed. Before, when I had fallen asleep, the silence outside had been complete, empty. The absence of sound in a place where sound had simply never existed. But now there was something in that silence. A texture, a presence, like the difference between a room that is empty and a room where someone is hiding. I held my breath and listened. At first there was nothing. Just the blood rushing in my ears and the faint tick of the van's engine cooling in the night air. I was about to dismiss my fear as the remnants of the nightmare when I heard it. Footsteps. The soft crunch of gravel under weight, slow and deliberate, circling my van. One set of footsteps at first, then another joining it from a different direction. Two people walking around my vehicle in the dead of night, not speaking, not hurrying, just walking. I pressed my hand over my mouth to muffle my breathing. Through the thin walls of the van, I could track their movement. One was near the back now, the other somewhere by the passenger side. They were not trying to be quiet. They wanted me to hear them. Then the footsteps stopped. Silence again. But worse this time, because now I knew I was not alone. I lay there for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds, waiting for something to happen. A knock on the door, a face at the window, the sound of the handle being tested. But nothing came. Just that heavy, expectant silence, like the pause before a predator strikes. Slowly moving as quietly as I could, I reached for the curtain that covered the small window above my mattress. My fingers found the edge of the fabric, and I hesitated, not sure I wanted to see what was outside, not sure I could handle knowing. But the not knowing was worse. I pulled the curtain back a fraction of an inch and peered out. The parking lot was empty. The single light still flickered overhead, casting its sickly yellow glow across the gravel. The restroom building squatted in the darkness, its door still hanging open. The trees beyond stood motionless against the black sky. No one was there. I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding. My imagination. The lingering effects of the nightmare. There was no one outside. I was alone. Then why did the fear not go away? I was about to let the curtain fall when I saw them. Two figures standing at the edge of the parking lot where the light barely reached the darkness. They were motionless, facing my van, their features impossible to make out at this distance, but I could see enough to know they were men, and I could see enough to know they were watching me. I jerked back from the window, my heart hammering. When I looked again, working up the courage to peek through the curtain once more, they were gone. Just shadows, I told myself. Trees that looked like people in the bad light. My brain playing tricks on me because I was scared and tired and alone in a place that felt wrong. But I did not believe it, not really. I checked my phone again. 2:38 a.m., still 22 minutes until my alarm. 22 minutes until I could justify starting the van and getting the hell out of here. I could leave now, of course. Nothing was stopping me. But some stubborn part of my brain insisted that leaving early would be admitting that I was scared. That there was something to be scared of, so I waited. And I listened. The footsteps came back, closer this time. Right outside the van, circling slowly, gravel grinding under each step. And with the footsteps came something else. Voices, low and murmuring just below the threshold of comprehension. Two men talking to each other in whispers that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I strained to hear what they were saying, but the words slipped away from me like water through fingers. The voices had a strange quality to them, an echo that did not match the enclosed space of the parking lot. They sounded distant, even though the footsteps told me the speakers were only feet away. Then one of the voices said my name, Tyler, clear as a bell cutting through the murmur like a knife. My name spoken by a stranger in the middle of nowhere at almost 3 a.m. Tyler, the voice said again, we know you are awake. I stopped breathing. Tyler, come outside. We just want to talk. The voice was calm, reasonable, the kind of voice a concerned neighbor might use or a helpful stranger offering directions. But underneath that surface, pleasantness was something else, something hungry. I did not move. I did not make a sound. I lay there on my mattress with my hand pressed over my mouth and my eyes squeezed shut like a child hiding from monsters under the bed. The footsteps circled closer. Then I heard a new sound, a soft rhythmic scraping like metal being drawn across metal. It came from the back of the van near the rear wheel, and it went on for several seconds before stopping abruptly. They were doing something to my vehicle, damaging it somehow, trapping me here. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw open the door and confront them, demand to know who they were and what they wanted. But something held me back, some instinct older than reason, older than language, that recognized a threat too dangerous to challenge directly. So I did nothing. I waited. The scraping stopped. The footsteps retreated. The voices faded into silence. I lay there for 5 minutes, then 10, barely daring to breathe. When I finally found the courage to move again, I crawled toward the front of the van and peered through a gap in the curtain that covered the windshield. The parking lot was empty once more. The light flickered overhead. Nothing moved in the darkness beyond. They are gone, I told myself. They gave up. I just need to wait a little longer and then I can leave. That was when I saw the face. It appeared without warning, filling the driver's side window inches from my own face, with only a pane of glass between us. A man's face, gaunt and pale, with features that seemed stretched too tight over the bones beneath. His skin had a grayish tint like meat left too long in the refrigerator, and his hair hung in lank, greasy strands around his hollow cheeks. But it was his eyes that froze me in place. They were wrong. Completely, fundamentally wrong. Where the pupil should have been, there was nothing. Just two pits of absolute blackness, deeper than the night sky, deeper than the space between stars. Looking into them felt like looking into an abyss. that went down forever, an emptiness that could swallow everything and still hunger for more. And he was smiling. His lips were pulled back from his teeth in a grin that stretched far too wide for a human face, curving up toward his ears in a way that should have been impossible. The teeth behind those lips were yellow and crooked, and there were too many of them, rows upon rows, disappearing back into the darkness of his throat. He raised one hand and tapped on the glass 3 times, slow and deliberate. The sound should have been soft, muffled by the window. Instead, it echoed through the van like gunshots, each tap sending a spike of ice through my chest. "Open the door, Tyler." The voice did not come from his mouth. His lips did not move. His smile did not falter. The voice came from inside my own head, resonating through my skull like someone had planted a speaker directly in my brain. "We have been waiting for you. We have been waiting for so long." I could not move. I could not breathe. I could not look away from those bottomless eyes, that impossible smile. I was trapped, pinned in place by a terror so complete that my body had simply stopped responding to commands. The man tilted his head, studying me through the glass like a scientist examining a specimen. "You looked into our eyes, Tyler. That means you can see us now. And we can see you. Forever." He pressed his palm flat against the window. The glass should have been cold from the night air, but where his hand touched it, frost began to spread. Delicate crystals of ice bloomed across the surface, reaching toward me like frozen fingers. "There is no point in running." The voice in my head continued. "This is our land. These are our roads. Everyone who comes here belongs to us eventually." Behind him, I saw the second figure emerge from the darkness. Another man, younger than the first, but with the same gray skin, the same too wide smile, the same pits of darkness where his eyes should have been. He was carrying something in his hand, a knife, the blade long and curved and stained with something dark. "Your car cannot take you anywhere now," the voice said. "We made sure of that. You can try to run if you want. They always try to run, but you will not get far." The first man leaned closer to the glass, his smile widening until it seemed to split his face in half. "Or you can open the door and make this easier. We promise it will not hurt, not for long." Something snapped inside me. The paralysis that had held me frozen broke all at once, replaced by a surge of pure animal terror. I threw myself toward the driver's seat, my hands fumbling for the keys I had left in the ignition, my fingers shaking so badly I could barely grip them. The engine coughed, sputtered, then roared to life. The man outside did not move. He just stood there, hands still pressed against the frosted glass, smile still carved into his face, watching me with those empty eyes. I slammed the van into drive and floored the gas pedal. The tires spun on the gravel, spraying rocks behind me as the van lurched forward. I aimed for the road, the narrow strip of asphalt that led away from this nightmare, and I did not look back. But something was wrong. The van was shaking, lurching to one side with every rotation of the wheels. A horrible grinding sound came from somewhere behind me, metal scraping against pavement, and the steering wheel fought against my hands like a living thing. The tire. They had done something to my tire. I looked in the rearview mirror and my blood turned to ice. They were following me, both of them walking side by side down the middle of the road, not running, not hurrying, just walking at a normal pace. But the distance between them and my van was not increasing. I was driving at least 30 miles per hour, the engine screaming, the damaged tire threatening to tear itself apart with every second. They were walking. And yet they stayed exactly the same distance behind me, their shapes growing no smaller in the mirror, their smiles never wavering. That was when I understood. That was when the last shred of rational explanation fell away and left only the horrible truth. They were not human. They had not been human for a very long time. And the normal rules, the rules of physics and distance and speed, did not apply to them. I pushed the gas pedal harder, demanding more from the van than it had ever given. The grinding from the rear wheel became a shriek, a metallic scream of protest that vibrated through the entire vehicle. The steering wheel jerked and shuddered in my hands. In the mirror, the two figures continued their leisurely pursuit, still walking, still smiling, still exactly the same distance behind me. The van made it about a quarter-mile up the road before the engine died. It happened without warning. One moment I was hurtling through the darkness, the next, the engine cut out and the van began to coast, slowing until it rolled to a stop on a slight incline and would not move another inch. I turned the key. Nothing. Again. Nothing. The engine was dead, the battery drained, as if something had sucked all the life out of it. I looked in the mirror. They were still coming. Closer now, perhaps 50 yards away, their shapes growing more distinct with each passing second. I could see the details of their faces, the texture of their gray skin, the bottomless pits of their eyes. My phone. I could call for help. I grabbed it from the passenger seat and dialed 911. The screen showed no service, just as it had for hours, but I had heard that emergency calls could sometimes go through even without signal. I pressed the phone to my ear and prayed. Static, dead air. Then 3 beeps and a recorded message telling me my call could not be completed. I tried again, same result. The figures in the mirror were closer now, 30 yards, 25. I was about to try a third time when my phone rang. The sound was so unexpected that I nearly dropped it. I looked at the screen, expecting to see unknown caller, or perhaps the number of the 911 dispatcher calling me back. Instead, I saw my own phone number. That was impossible. You cannot call yourself from your own phone. The number displayed on the screen was my number, the same 10 digits I had memorized years ago, calling me from somewhere that should not exist. I answered anyway. I do not know why. Maybe because I thought it would be someone who could help. Maybe because the situation had already become so impossible that one more impossibility did not seem to matter. Maybe because some part of me needed to know. "Hello," I said. My voice came out as a whisper. For a moment there was only silence. Then a voice spoke. My voice. My exact voice, but different somehow. Emptier, colder, like someone had recorded me speaking and played it back from the bottom of a well. "Do not try to run the voice that was mine but was not mine said. You have been chosen. You will stay here with us forever." The line went dead. I lowered the phone and looked up. They were standing right outside my window, both of them side by side, their faces pressed close to the glass. The older one with the scar running down his cheek, the younger one with the long hair hanging over his empty eyes. They were not smiling anymore. Their expressions were blank now, as empty as their gazes, as if the masks they had been wearing had finally slipped away to reveal the nothing underneath. The older one raised his hand and knocked on the window. 3 slow taps, just like before. "Time is up, Tyler," the voice in my head said. "Tonight you will learn what we are, and you will become one of us." I closed my eyes. I did not want to see what came next. I did not want to watch those hands reach through the glass, did not want to feel their cold fingers close around my throat. If I was going to die here in this van on this road that did not exist, I wanted the last thing I saw to be the darkness behind my own eyelids. But the hands did not come. Instead, there was light. A blaze of white cut through the darkness, sweeping across the road, illuminating the trees and the gravel, and the 2 figures standing beside my van. Headlights. Another vehicle coming from somewhere up the road, getting closer with every second. I opened my eyes in time to see the 2 men turn toward the approaching light. Their blank expressions flickered, something like annoyance crossing their features. They looked at each other, then back at me, and the older one leaned close to the window. "This is not over," the voice in my head whispered. "We have marked you now. We will find you again. No matter where you go, no matter how far you run, we will find you. And next time there will be no one to save you." Then they stepped back from the van and melted into the darkness at the edge of the road, their forms dissolving into the shadows between the trees, as if they had never been there at all. The other vehicle, an old pickup truck with rust spots on the fenders and a dent in the front bumper, pulled up beside my van. The driver's door opened, and a figure stepped out. An old man with white hair and a face like weathered leather, wearing a flannel shirt and jeans that had seen better days. He was carrying a shotgun. "You all right, son?" the old man asked. His voice was gruff but not unkind. I opened my mouth to answer, but no words came out. I just sat there shaking, staring at him with eyes that I knew must have looked half mad. The old man nodded as if he understood. "Let me guess," he said. "Two fellas. Gray skin. Eyes like holes in the world. Smiles that do not belong on human faces." I managed to nod. The old man sighed and lowered his shotgun. "Get in my truck," he said. "Your van is not going anywhere tonight. We need to get you out of here before they come back. And trust me, son, they always come back." I did not argue. I did not ask questions. I just grabbed my phone and my keys and climbed out of my ruined van, my legs barely holding me upright, and followed the old man to his truck. As I climbed into the passenger seat, I looked back at the road behind us. The darkness was empty. No figures, no shapes, no smiles gleaming in the shadows. But I could feel them watching. Even though I could not see them, I knew they were there, waiting, patient, hungry. "You can call me Frank," the old man said as he started the engine. His hands were steady on the wheel, his eyes scanning the road ahead with the alertness of someone who had spent a lifetime watching for threats in the dark. "Franklin Whitmore, if you want the whole thing." But nobody has called me Franklin in a long time. "Tyler," I managed to say, my voice hoarse. "Tyler Morrison." "I know," Frank replied. "They were saying your name. That is how I knew someone was in trouble." I stared at him. "You heard them?" "Son, I have been listening to them for longer than you have been alive. Every night when the sun goes down, I can hear them whispering. Names, mostly. The names of everyone they have taken. And sometimes when someone new wanders into their territory, they get excited. Start passing the word around like kids with a secret." He glanced at me, and in the dim light of the dashboard, I saw something old and tired in his eyes. Tonight they were saying Tyler over and over again. So I came out here hoping I would not be too late. Too late for what I asked, though I was not sure I wanted to know. Frank was quiet for a moment. The truck bounced over a pothole, and I heard something clatter in the bed behind us. "Too late to stop you from becoming one of them," he finally said. The truck wound through the darkness, following a road I had not noticed before, one that branched off from Route 47 and cut through the trees at an angle. The headlights illuminated nothing but more dead oaks, their branches intertwining overhead like the ribs of some enormous skeleton. "What are they?" I asked. Frank did not answer right away. He reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a pack of cigarettes, shaking one loose and lighting it with a practiced flick of his lighter. The flame illuminated his face for a moment, revealing lines carved by decades of something worse than age. "You ever hear stories about this part of the country?" he asked. "Old stories from before there were highways and rest stops? From before there were even towns?" I shook my head. "The natives knew about this place," Frank said. "The Shoshone, the Paiute, the tribes that lived here before the white man came, they had names for it. Names that roughly translate to things like the hungry ground or the place where the lost stay lost. They knew to avoid it, built their camps miles away, never hunted here, never even walked through if they could help it." He took a drag on his cigarette, and the tip glowed orange in the darkness. "Then the settlers came, wagon trains heading west looking for a new life in California. Most of them took the established routes, the ones that had been mapped and marked and traveled by thousands before them. But some of them got greedy. Some of them got impatient. Some of them thought they knew a better way." His voice dropped lower. "In 1847, there was a wagon train that decided to take a shortcut through this area. About 30 people, families mostly. They had a guide who promised them he knew a faster route, one that would shave weeks off their journey. What he did not tell them was that the route went straight through the hungry ground, What happened to them? I asked. Frank's hands tightened on the steering wheel. They were never seen again. No bodies, no graves, no trace that they had ever existed. The only reason we know about them at all is because a fur trapper who had been traveling with them left the group a few days before they took the shortcut. He wrote about it in his journal, wondered what had happened to his friends. He looked at me. That was almost 200 years ago, and people have been disappearing on this stretch of road ever since. But those men, I said, the ones who came after me, came. They were not from the 1800s. Their clothes looked like they were from the 70s or 80s. Frank nodded. Earl and Bobby Hitchens, brothers from Oklahoma. They came through here in the summer of 1973, driving cross-country to find work in California. Stopped at Rest Stop 47 for the night. He flicked ash out the window. I was the sheriff of the nearest town back then. Little place called Dry Creek, about 20 miles from here. When the brothers did not show up at their destination, their family filed a missing persons report. I was the one who went looking for them. Did you find them? Found their car, Frank said, still parked at the rest stop, doors hanging open, everything they owned still inside. But no sign of the brothers themselves. He paused. Until I saw them 3 nights later, standing in the woods near the rest stop, looking at me with those empty eyes. So they are dead, I said. Earl and Bobby, they died here and now they are ghosts, spirits. Whatever you want to call them. Frank shook his head slowly. Not ghosts, he said. Not exactly. Ghosts are echoes, recordings of people who used to be alive playing back on a loop. What Earl and Bobby became, what everyone who dies in the hungry ground becomes, that is something different. Something older. Something that is still hungry, still thinking, still wanting. He looked at me and his eyes were hard. The hungry ground does not just kill people, Tyler. It keeps them, traps their souls in the moment of their death, binds them to this land, and uses them to hunt for more. Every person they catch makes the hungry ground stronger. And after 200 years of feeding, it has gotten very strong indeed. The truck crested a small hill, and suddenly the darkness ahead was not quite so absolute. A faint glow rose from somewhere beyond the next ridge, a sickly, greenish light that pulsed slowly like a diseased heartbeat. That is where they were taking you, Frank said. The heart of the hungry ground, the place where they performed the ritual. What ritual? The one that would have turned you into one of them. He slowed the truck, his eyes fixed on the glow ahead. They cannot just kill you, he explained. That is not how it works. The hungry ground needs willing sacrifices. People who choose to give up, who accept their fate, who surrender. He shook his head. That is why they play games, why they stalk and scare and torment instead of just attacking outright. They need to break you first, need to make you want to give in. And once you do, once you stop fighting, the ritual begins. And then there is no going back. The glow was getting brighter now, and with it came sounds, voices, dozens of them chanting something in a language I did not recognize. The words seemed to press against my skull, making my head throb with each syllable. Why are we going toward it? I asked, my voice rising. If that is where they wanted to take me, why are we driving straight into it? Because the only way out is through. Frank said, the hungry ground has you marked now. You looked into their eyes, and that means they can find you anywhere. No matter how far you run, no matter where you hide, they will always know where you are. The connection does not break. Then what do we do? Frank reached under his seat and pulled out a second shotgun. He handed it to me. We fight. The truck burst through a final line of trees and into a clearing I recognized from my nightmare. The graveyard. It was exactly as I had dreamed it. Rows upon rows of crude wooden crosses stretching into the darkness, each one marking the final resting place of a soul that would never find peace. Vehicles surrounded them, cars and trucks and vans from every decade, rusted hulks that had once carried living people to this place of death. And standing among the crosses, arranged in a loose circle around a pit of greenish fire that burned without fuel or smoke, were the dead. There had to be 50 of them. Men and women, young and old, all with the same gray skin, the same empty eyes, the same terrible smiles. They stood motionless, watching our truck approach their heads, turning in perfect synchronization like puppets controlled by a single hand. At the center of the circle closest to the fire stood Earl and Bobby Hitchens. They had beaten us here. Of course they had. The rules of distance and time did not apply to them, not in this place. They were part of the hungry ground now, and the hungry ground could move them wherever it wanted. Earl stepped forward as Frank stopped the truck. His voice echoed across the clearing, not from his mouth, but from everywhere at once. "Franklin Whitmore, I was wondering when you would show up. You know why I am here," Frank said, climbing out of the truck. His shotgun was raised, pointed at Earl's chest. "Let the boy go. He is not part of this." Earl's smile widened. "Everyone who enters the hungry ground is part of this," he said. "You know that better than anyone, Sheriff. After all, you have been interfering with our work for 50 years, saving the ones we marked, warning travelers away from our roads. You have been a thorn in our side for a very long time." His empty eyes glittered in the green light of the fire. "But you cannot save this one. He has already looked into our eyes. He belongs to us now." Frank's finger tightened on the trigger. "He belongs to himself," he said, "and I am going to make sure he stays that way." He fired. The shotgun blast hit Earl square in the chest, knocking him backward. For a moment, hope surged through me. Maybe it was that easy. Maybe a shotgun loaded with rock salt or silver or whatever it was that killed monsters could put these things down for good. But Earl did not fall. He stumbled back a few steps, looked down at the hole in his chest where gray flesh and darker things were visible, and then looked back up at Frank. "That hurt," he said. His smile never wavered. "It has been a long time since anyone hurt me." He straightened up, and as I watched in horror, the wound began to close. Gray flesh knitting itself back together, the hole shrinking and sealing until there was nothing left but a tear in his shirt. "You cannot kill what is already dead," Sheriff Earl said. "You should know that by now." He raised his hand, and the other dead began to move. They came from all directions at once, closing in on the truck in a tightening circle. Frank fired again and again, the shotgun blasts echoing across the clearing, but for everyone he knocked down, 2 more took its place. And none of them stayed down for long. "Get out of the truck," Frank shouted at me. "Run for the trees on the north side." There is a line of white birches about 200 yards from here. That is the boundary. If you can reach it, they cannot follow. What about you? Frank looked at me, and for the first time I saw something like peace in his eyes. "I have been fighting these things for 50 years, he said. "I am tired, Tyler. Tired of the nightmares. Tired of the whispers. Tired of watching people I could not save become monsters." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small and red, a road flare. "But I can give you a chance, the dead fear fire. It reminds them of what they lost. If I can distract them long enough, you might be able to make it to the boundary. I cannot let you do that." "You do not have a choice," Frank said. "And neither do I. This is what I was meant to do, Tyler. This is why I've been hanging on for so long. I was waiting for someone worth saving." He struck the flare against the side of the truck, and it burst into brilliant red light. The dead recoiled, their gray faces twisting in something that might have been pain or fear or both. "Run!" Frank shouted. "Run, and do not look back." I ran. I threw open the truck door and sprinted toward the tree line, my legs pumping my lungs, burning the shouts of the dead echoing behind me. I did not look back. I could not look back. I just ran faster than I had ever run in my life, branches whipping at my face and roots trying to trip my feet. Behind me I heard Frank's voice shouting something in a language I did not understand. I heard the roar of flames, sudden and huge, and the screaming of the dead as the fire touched them. And I heard Earl's voice cutting through it all. "You cannot escape, Tyler Morrison. We will find you. We will always find you." But I kept running. And then I saw them. White birches, their pale bark gleaming in the darkness, standing in a row like sentinels at the edge of the world. The boundary. It had to be. I crashed through the line of trees and felt something shift. The air changed. The pressure that had been building in my skull suddenly released. The whispers that had been scratching at the edges of my mind went silent. I turned around. The dead stood at the edge of the birches, pressed against an invisible wall, their hands reaching toward me but unable to cross. Earl and Bobby were at the front, their empty eyes fixed on my face, their smiles gone. "This is not over," Earl's voice echoed in my head. "You have our mark. You will carry us with you wherever you go. And one day, when you are tired, when you are weak, when you have forgotten what it means to hope, you will come back to us." He raised his hand in a wave. "Not goodbye. A promise. We will be waiting." Then they turned and walked back into the darkness, and I was alone. I do not remember much about the rest of that night. I walked until I found a road, a real road that appeared on maps and led to places with names. I flagged down a passing truck, and the driver, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a thermos of coffee, took one look at me and did not ask questions. She just drove me to the nearest town and dropped me off at a diner that was just opening for breakfast. I called my parents from a payphone. I told them I had been in an accident, that my van had broken down, that I was fine, but I needed a few days to sort things out. They believed me. Why would they not? A week later, I made it to Sacramento. I moved back into my childhood bedroom and told everyone who asked that I was taking some time to figure out my next steps. I got a job at a grocery store, started paying off my student loans, tried to rebuild a normal life. But normal is not something you can go back to, not after what I had seen, not after what I had survived. The first few weeks were the hardest. I could not sleep without seeing their faces. I could not close my eyes without hearing their whispers. Every shadow looked like a figure waiting to step forward. Every silence felt like the pause before something terrible. I tried to tell myself it was over, that I had escaped the hungry ground, and whatever connection they had formed with me had been broken when I crossed the boundary, that Earl's threats had been nothing but empty words designed to keep me afraid. But I knew better. The whispers never completely stopped. They were quiet now, barely audible, like a radio playing in a distant room. But they were always there at the edge of my perception, saying my name in voices that should not exist. Tyler, Tyler, Tyler Jean's waiting. 3 weeks after I arrived in Sacramento, I went to the police. I told them a modified version of the story. I said I had been attacked at a rest stop in Nevada by 2 men who had slashed my tires and tried to break into my van. I gave them descriptions of Earl and Bobby of the rest stop of Route 47. I left out the supernatural elements. I just wanted someone to investigate to confirm that what I had experienced was real. The detective who took my statement was polite but skeptical. He said he would contact the authorities in Nevada and look into it. A few days later, he called me back. "We checked with the Nevada Department of Transportation," he said. "There is no state Route 47 in their system. There is no rest stop 47 on any official map. We sent officers to search the area you described and they found nothing. No rest stop, no graveyard, no evidence of anything unusual. I felt the floor tilt beneath my feet." "That is impossible," I said. "I was there. I saw it." "I believe you experienced something traumatic," the detective replied carefully. "But whatever it was, it does not appear to exist in any official records. Sometimes the mind creates false memories after a stressful event. It is more common than people think." I did not argue with him. What was the point? The hungry ground did not exist for people like him. It only existed for people like me. That night I searched online for Franklin Whitmore, the old man who had saved my life, who had sacrificed himself so I could escape. I wanted to find him, to thank him, to ask him how he had survived so long fighting something that could not be killed. What I found made my blood run cold. The article was from a newspaper archive dated November 1985. The headline read, "Former Sheriff Found Dead in Remote Area." The article described how Franklin James Whitmore, age 65, former sheriff of Dry Creek, Nevada, had been found deceased in his vehicle on an unmarked road in the desert. The cause of death was listed as undetermined. There were no signs of foul play, no evidence of accident or illness. He had simply stopped living. The article included a photograph, a black and white image of a man with white hair and weathered features wearing a sheriff's uniform. It was Frank. The same Frank who had pulled up beside my van in his pickup truck. The same Frank who had told me about Earl and Bobby Hitchens. The same Frank who had given me a shotgun and lit a road flare so I could escape. But according to this article, Frank had been dead for 40 years. I sat there staring at the screen, trying to make sense of it. Had I imagined him? Had my traumatized mind created a savior out of nothing? Or had Frank become something else after his death? Not one of the hungry dead, but something different? A guardian instead of a predator? A protector who had spent decades watching over the roads he had once patrolled in life? I will never know for certain, but I choose to believe that Frank was real, that his sacrifice meant something, that somewhere out there his spirit is still watching, still waiting to help the next traveler who stumbles into darkness. It is the only explanation that lets me sleep at night. 6 months after I returned to Sacramento, a package arrived at my parents' house. It had no return address, no postage stamps, no indication of how it had gotten there, just my name written on the front in handwriting that made my heart stop. Inside was a photograph, a Polaroid slightly faded showing the graveyard in the heart of the hungry ground. The wooden crosses stretched into the distance, each one marking a soul that had been taken. The green fire burned at the center, casting its sickly light over everything. But there was a new cross in the foreground, fresh wood, pale and unweathered, and hanging from it was a driver's license. The photo was too small to read the name, but I could see the face. A young woman with dark hair. The same young woman I had glimpsed in my dreams, standing at the edge of the circle of dead, watching me with eyes that still held a trace of light. She had helped me, I realized. In those final moments when the dead were closing in and Frank was preparing his sacrifice, she had done something. Distracted them, maybe, or shown me which way to run. She had been one of them, but she had not forgotten what it meant to be human, and they had punished her for it. I turned the photograph over. On the back, written in the same handwriting as the envelope, was a message. She paid the price for your freedom, but do not worry, Tyler. We still have a place waiting for you, right next to hers. And below that, in smaller letters, we are very patient. We have nothing but time. That was 1 year ago. Since then, I've moved 3 times. I've changed my phone number twice. I've deleted all my social media accounts and cut contact with most of the people I used to know. I sleep with the lights on the television, playing anything to fill the silence. Because in the silence, I can still hear them. The whispers are always there. Most of the time, they are quiet enough to ignore, background noise like the hum of traffic or the buzz of fluorescent lights. But some nights, usually around 2:47 in the morning, they get louder. They say my name. They tell me to come home. They promise that the fear will end if I just give in. And on those nights, if I look out my window, I see them. 2 figures standing at the end of the street at the edge of the light cast by the street lamps. They do not move, do not approach. They just watch. Earl and Bobby, or whatever is left of them, keeping their vigil, reminding me that they are waiting. I do not know how much longer I can live like this. The fear is exhausting. The constant vigilance wears you down in ways I cannot describe. Sometimes I find myself thinking about what Earl said about how the people Frank saved eventually came back, how the call was too strong to resist. I understand now why they went back. It was not that they wanted to die. It was that they wanted the fear to stop. They wanted to sleep through the night without waking up in a cold sweat. They wanted to walk down a dark street without checking over their shoulder every few seconds. They wanted peace, and the hungry ground promised them peace. An eternity of emptiness, of forgetting, of simply not existing anymore. For someone who has seen what I have seen, that can start to sound appealing. But I am not going back. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. because Frank did not sacrifice himself so I could give up. That woman, whoever she was, did not suffer punishment so I could surrender. And somewhere out there, someone else might be driving down an empty road in the middle of the night about to make the same mistake I made. If my story can save even one of them, then everything I have been through will be worth it. So here is my warning. Every year, more than 600,000 people are reported missing in the United States. Most of them are found within days or weeks, but about 400 of them vanish without a trace. No bodies, no clues, no explanations. They simply disappear as if they never existed. Many of them were last seen on highways, in remote areas, near rest stops that do not appear on any official map. I am not saying that all of them ended up in places like the Hungry Ground. I am not saying that there are dozens of places like Rest Stop 47 scattered across the country waiting for travelers to stumble into their embrace. But I'm not saying there are not either. So if you are driving alone on a highway you do not recognize and your GPS suddenly loses signal and you see a sign for a road that does not match any map you have ever seen, keep driving. Do not turn. Do not stop. Do not let curiosity get the better of you. And if you see a rest stop in the middle of nowhere with a flickering light and an empty parking lot and a sign that says, "Travelers welcome, keep driving," floor the accelerator and do not look back, because some places do not want to help you rest. Some places just want to keep you forever. If you see two men standing by the side of the road, do not stop. Do not roll down your window. Do not look into their eyes. Because once you have looked into those empty pits, they will never let you go. And if you are lying in bed tonight and you hear a sound outside your window, 3 slow taps like knuckles against glass, do not get up. Do not look. Do not answer. Just close your eyes and wait for morning, because the Hungry Ground is patient. It has been waiting for hundreds of years, and it will keep waiting long after you and I are gone. But as long as we do not answer, as long as we refuse to give in, as long as we keep fighting and running and choosing to live, we win. One more day of fear is one more day of life, and life, no matter how frightening, is always worth fighting for. That is my story. That is my warning. Now I want to hear yours. Have you ever driven down a road that did not feel right? Have you ever stopped at a rest stop that made your skin crawl? Have you ever seen something in your rearview mirror that should not have been there? Tell me your story. Share your experience. Because I know I am not the only one. And if we warn each other, if we share what we know about the dark places and the things that live in them, maybe we can save someone else from making the same mistakes we made. Stay safe out there. Keep your doors locked. And whatever you do, do not stop at Rest Stop 47. Good night and drive safe.